Okay, welcome to Gut Feeling. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so simple steps to restore and strengthen your gut. I'm very excited to share this. This is an area of practice that I have been seeing and helping patients in for many years. And there's always so much new information coming out for us to learn about. So it's really, really helpful in tackling simple to complex issues. So let's do a quick overview of today's webinar. So, why gut health matters? It really does matter. So, gut health not only is the source of your nourishment coming in through the gut, it's how we also detoxify and get rid of waste. Your gut health, your microbiome has so many impacts on your overall health. And we're going to explore that in a lot more detail today so that you come away having a really good understanding about, what is so important about the gut microbiome. So we're going to talk all about that today, understanding common symptoms. So, some of the most common symptoms that we see in the clinic are things like bloating or bowel motions that are not happening in the way that we would like them to. So, dysregulated motility, from those types of kind of common things to SIBO, intolerances, indigestion, reflux, you name it. We see it all. So we're going to talk about the common symptoms and try to understand why they're happening. We want to talk about contributing factors to gut imbalances. So I'm sure you've probably heard some of the things that obviously we will talk about nutrition. Nutrition can contribute to imbalance, but so can things like stress, medications, things like that. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. We're going to talk about food as gut medicine. So, this is one of the empowering things about understanding gut health is that you can have a really big influence on your gut health by what you choose to put in your body, what you choose to eat, and understanding the types of foods, even healthy foods that might be aggravating your situation. We're going to be talking about connections to other systems. So, as I mentioned before, the gut microbiome has connections to systems outside of the actual gut itself. So, we're going to be talking about that. And you might hopefully gain some understanding about other common things that you might experience to do with your immune system, your skin, the nervous system, with mood and energy and that type of thing. So, we're going to talk about those connections. And we're also going to be talking about steps to healing your gut. So, let's get started. But first, a little bit about myself. So, you may or may not have seen me in the clinic if you are joining us for this webinar. My name is Emma Argiris, formerly Emma Tippett. I got married last year, so that is the name change. I have over 12 years of clinical experience and with a special interest and focus on gut health and chronic gut issues. And this kind of came about because I saw growing up my mum suffer with a lot of very serious, debilitating gut issues. And this was around the time where things like IBS were just starting to be spoken about. So this is probably like more than 20 years ago, like maybe 35 years ago. And she was diagnosed with celiac disease when she was in her 40s. And before that, she was a celiac and she was still eating wheat and it was making her very sick. But, she really didn't get a lot of support from conventional medicine, from the medical side of things. A lot of the time she was just dismissed. Her symptoms were dismissed until it actually was discovered that she was actually a celiac. So that wasn't the end of her gut journey, however, and I did help her a lot over the years, especially with the introduction of functional gut testing, which has been a real game changer in treating the gut. And the other thing that I'm really passionate about is educating and inspiring people to take ownership of their health and well-being. So, I don't think we're taught from a young age that we really, we have to play an active role in our health and well-being. And we don't always need to outsource that to people. We need to learn about our bodies, learn about what suits us as an individual so that we can know how to nourish and support our body, our individual makeup. So I really love helping and guiding people to coming to a place where they're able to do that themselves. Okay, so why gut health matters. As I said before, there's impacts on all aspects of your health, links to your skin, mood, and the immune system. And, we're going to dive deeper into that when we get to talk about the skin specifically, the mood specifically, and your immune system. But, if you think about things like the skin, so when what we see with skin issues, that if you work on clearing up your diet, for example, it will influence your skin. We can link skin issues to hormonal imbalances as well, of course. But if you think about the common medications that they treat for skin issues, doxycycline is one of them, and that is an antibiotic, and that is going to kill off bacteria. So we know that there's links to the skin with potential bacterial overgrowths like SIBO. So a lot of the time, the first line defense or me understanding what's going on with someone's skin, if it is a lot of the time we see women, we will test hormones if the skin seems to flare up on a cyclical basis in response to hormonal change. And then, or in a concurrent way, we will look at doing a gut microbiome to work out if there's any bacterial overgrowths or if there's a deficiency in the microbiome. So there's definite links to skin. The mood, we know the gut-brain axis. We know that the gut is the second brain. This is common knowledge now, but it hasn't always been that way. When I first started practicing, the gut-brain connection wasn't something that was discussed a lot. We acknowledged leaky gut, but from a conventional side of health, it was not acknowledged that you could suffer from something like leaky gut and it could have impacts on your skin, mood, and immune system. So I like to think as naturopaths, we really pioneered that, way of looking at the gut and how it links to your whole body. And it is the key to nourishing your body, to nutrient absorption and to detoxification. So, creating a strong foundation for your overall health really does begin in the gut. It's always the place that we would start as naturopaths. If there's imbalances in the gut, start there. And a lot of the other things can start to fall into place and improve once we work out what's going on with the gut. So what's going on in there? So understanding your gut symptoms. So when we're trying to understand our gut health and how it's meant to all work in unison, we need to understand that it's a process. And all along the way of that process, there's particular things that can impact that. So if we sort of start up in the upper digestive tract, straight away, before we even eat, what's going on with salivary amylase and digestive secretions in the mouth is a really important starting step in optimal digestion. So if we think about what could impact that, rushing, not sitting down and eating, not chewing your food properly, like it's really simple stuff and probably things that you've heard about before, but it makes a big difference. And in this day and age, a lot of us are really busy and we're rushing around and we're not taking time to sit and eat and enjoy our food. It's a sensory process. We need to start it out right, because what happens in the mouth and down into the stomach influences what happens along the chain of digestion. So if we're experiencing things like reflux, for example, it's telling us that while conventionally, medically speaking, they look at neutralizing acid with reflux because it feels like a very acidic condition, what it actually means is that you don't have enough hydrochloric acid and the food is not digesting properly and there is fermentation taking place. There could be some, irritation to the stomach lining, and that is causing the esophageal sphincter, so up at the top part of the stomach, to slacken and it's causing the food to come back up. So that's what is happening when there is a condition of reflux or indigestion. So often what we need to do first is make sure that there's no inflammation going on in the gastric lining and the stomach lining. And then we work at increasing digestive secretions like HCl, hydrochloric acid. And that helps us to break down our food well, especially our protein. And it also helps to make sure it's a first line defense. So it helps to make sure that any bacteria or microbes that we may come into contact with from the external environment or on our food, it helps to kill it all off. So if that's not happening well, it means that digested, it's called a bolus of food, it hits the small intestine at a pH level that is not optimal to have bile release occur from the gallbladder. So we know the liver makes bile, and bile is stored in the gallbladder for release in the digestive process. And what bile helps us to do is to break down fats in the food, and it also helps peristaltic motion. So when we're thinking about a condition like constipation, often what we need to think about is what's going on in the start of the digestive process. So what's going on with hydrochloric acid, what's going on with bile release. So oftentimes there's problems up that end of the digestive tract, and it is influencing things down the lower end of the digestive tract in the colon. So this then could result in altered bowel motions. It could result in more bloating and more gas because the food isn't being broken down properly in the stomach, and we're getting more particles of carbohydrates and starchy things coming into the small intestine, which bacteria feeds on. But that's not the only thing that can cause bloating and flatulence or gas. So if we have a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, so we're thinking about microbes that are opportunistic, so it's normal for them to be there, but not in any great number. And if it is in any great number, then that is going to be feeding on carbohydrates, sugars, and that type of thing, even if they're healthy things. All carbohydrates are broken down into sugars. Simple sugars and actual refined sugar is going to really feed these things a lot more, but you're still going to potentially get a problem with too many even healthy carbohydrates. So that's not because you shouldn't be eating those foods, but because there's this overgrowth in the small intestine, and that is feeding the problem. So that happens with parasites as well. They do feed on these things, and you might feel very uncomfortable. You might have pain, gas, bloating, and altered bowel motions. So these are the common things that happen through the digestive tract. And then with altered bowel motions, there could be any number of things going on there. There could be as a result of bacterial overgrowths. It could be parasites. And you can kind of swing one way or the other with these things. So some people might have more loose bowel motions. Some people might have a slower bowel motion. When we start to see imbalance with the gut, so for example, if your immune function through the gut is called secretory IgA is low, and you have low microbes, you may start to develop healthy microbes, I should say, so your healthy microbiome, you may start to develop food intolerances. So food intolerances then are obviously going to impact if your body's not reacting well to the food that you're putting in, then you may have some sort of response or reaction that could be any number of those symptoms. So the bloating, gas, altered bowel motions, that type of thing, or pain. So you might get systemic things with food intolerance as well. You might get headaches, you might get skin issues, it might aggravate acne, it might aggravate eczema, these types of things. So very common, but it sounds like a very complex situation, but there are ways to streamline and understand what's going on in there when we do things like functional testing, for example, so we can really get a picture of understanding of why these things are happening. So we also can have inflammation going on in the gut, and dysbiosis is a gut bacteria imbalance or leaky gut. And the things that influence that is issues with your healthy microbiome and the impacts of stress and high cortisol on your gut. So there can be a lot going on that can make us feel really uncomfortable. And I think that's why, in general, the conventional approach may or may not work to resolve people's problems. So a conventional approach doesn't look at this functional system where we need to look at the functional aspects of the gut. We need to look at the full microbial aspects of the gut to really understand We could get little bits and pieces of information from a conventional understanding. So, you might look at a H. pylori test, which is a bacteria in the stomach. You might look at confirming food intolerances. You might look at confirming a SIBO diagnosis or parasites, all separate kind of tests. But the solution for that is usually like food restriction, antibiotics, or just general management of, say, an IBS situation. So the conventional approach doesn't really bring lasting results. So even if you were to be put on a FODMAPs diet, for example, and you find that a lot of your symptoms improve, well, what's going to happen with that, those foods that you've cut out? Like a lot of really good healthy foods you've had to cut out because your body can't break them down well. If you just keep them out, you're not getting the benefits of those, which is a lot of prebiotics that are in those types of foods. So you can end up with a decreased microbiome, which is going to have potential consequences within itself. And you're going to have to avoid those foods forever, basically. It doesn't have to be that way. You can actually repair the gut, rebalance the gut, and eventually put those foods back in that you're not reacting well to, unless you have an autoimmune condition like celiac disease. So once you develop antibodies against a food, it's very difficult then to rebalance that because the immune system has a memory. Okay, so let me just make sure that I'm going in the right order. So let's talk about hidden contributors. So hidden contributors to gut imbalance. So all of those symptoms that I mentioned, I have touched on some of these. So one of them is parasites or Candida overgrowth. So often these things, look, parasites are usually tested for medically in certain circumstances. So if you have a very acute issue going on in the gut, and maybe you've been traveling or that type of thing, and you come back and you've got some nasty things going on in the gut, yes, parasites will be usually tested for. But you can actually have parasites like without travel and without extreme acute symptoms. You could just have IBS sort of symptoms where you're uncomfortable a lot of the time, and it could be a parasite. The most common ones are blastocystis and dianthoniba. These are the most common ones I see on our GI microbiome mapping test. I don't actually see Candida as commonly as these parasites, would you believe? So a lot of people, they may see online little tests that you can do to confirm whether you have a Candida or yeast overgrowth. They may read the collection of symptoms and think, yes, I really align with those symptoms. I must have a Candida overgrowth. But in my opinion, it's always better to test for these things than guess, because you could go on this Candida diet, which the conventional one's really not that great. You could be taking a whole heap of antimicrobials, and perhaps you don't need to be doing that. And you might actually be disrupting the balance of that healthy bacteria in the gut by using something that you don't need to be using. So a lot of those symptoms we could see with just that are common in Candida, we could see those sorts of presentations in just very, very low healthy microbes. So I do think that it's always important to test properly so that you know exactly what you need to treat. Now, SIBO or bacterial overgrowth is also very, very common. And medically speaking, they would use antibiotics to treat this, which it will get rid of bacterial overgrowths. But what effectively it's going to do is really disrupt your healthy microbiome too. You may have heard that it takes up to 12 months for your gut to recover from one course of antibiotics, and that recover meaning that you would have to be helping that recovery. So looking at pre and probiotics to help to rebuild the microbiome, because the gut will repopulate with whatever is strongest in number. So it could be a stubborn streptococcus or staphylococcus that is present that didn't get killed off by the antibiotics properly, and that will regrow in numbers. So, I would say that diagnosing SIBO properly, looking at natural methods that are holistic. So yes, you need to do some antimicrobial work, but you want to look at like understanding why did the body allow this? Why did the gut allow this overgrowth to take place? And usually it's because your healthy microbiome is not optimal. Hence the next box, which is low healthy gut bacteria. So in some cases, I have seen some really, uncomfortable chronic things going on with the gut. And when we do our microbiome testing, the biggest thing that we're seeing is low healthy microbes. There might not be any other kind of nasty microbes overgrowing. There might be one or two functional markers that we need to look at supporting, but low healthy microbes can have a really big impact on, how your gut is functioning. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail soon. Stress impacts the gut. This is huge, and it is a really big one, I find, for women in particular. A lot of the time we are gut reactors, so we will feel emotion in the gut, and we'll feel stress in the gut. But effectively what this can lead to is a high situation of cortisol and fight or flight, which could be stimulated in your daily life just because you're busy, under pressure at work. You might not be finding that it's impacting your mental health and well-being that much, but it could be impacting your physiological well-being. So it's really important to understand. I have a lot of patients that will say, oh, I don't think I'm stressed. But when we look at how their body is responding, their body is stressed. It's just that they might be mentally and emotionally handling it quite well. So, stress on the gut, we need to look at things like anxiety and things like that too, because your body is under physiological stress when you are anxious. And cortisol on the gut can be very inflammatory for the gut lining. It also can contribute to things like leaky gut, and it impacts your digestive secretion. So all of your energy moves away from the gut when you're in fight or flight. It goes to the extremities, to your peripheral extremities, so hands, feet, and the head. So you get a rush of energy to those areas. So if you're feeling like, oh, maybe, yes, I could be in fight or flight a lot, well, you're not got a lot of energy there for digestion. So that is, then we need to look at support for the nervous system as well as support for the gut. And then, are you eating right for your gut? So it's so confusing these days, like online, on social media and things like that. There's always some new diet for people to try, whether it's the carnivore diet, whether it's now the sugar diet, which is one that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can just imagine all the unhappy gut symptoms with the diet that is just pure carbohydrates and that's it. All these types of diets, the keto diet. In my opinion, I think that, yes, we can use the manipulation of nutrition to achieve certain things in the body, but I do think it is like, and this might be certain things that people are doing from a fitness kind of perspective, but I really think it's important to create a good foundation where you know how to eat to keep your gut happy as well as enjoying food. Like food is a pleasure for a lot of people, but we need to have, a consistent foundation of good nutrition going in that our body seems to like. And we also need to know, okay, if there's some compromisation within the gut function and we kind of work that out, for a period of time, you might need to eat in a particular way so that you are helping your gut to heal as opposed to making it harder for your gut to heal. Okay, so signs to look for. So, I mean, if you are watching this, you're obviously interested in gut health, but the signs to look for these hidden kind of imbalances or hidden contributing factors are things like constant bloating. So bloating can have a number of causes, and when you come to see a practitioner, our job is to work out what are the most likely causes for that. Now, it could be anything from stress to insufficient digestive secretions, to bacterial overgrowths, to parasites, to Candida, all of these types of things, even low healthy microbes. And it is very hard without testing to work out what that actually is. Sugar cravings. So our body will often crave what feeds the dominant things within us. So it's an ecosystem on the inside. And if there are dominant levels of microbes that aren't helping us, they're actually causing problems, we'll be craving what feeds it. We can also crave sugar for other reasons too, like imbalance of blood glucose. Also, it might be adrenal dysfunction or adrenal burnout. We might be craving sugars. So, but it can be gut related. Fatigue. So we might experience fatigue after eating. Our body is struggling to digest what we're putting in. We might also have fatigue in relation to detoxification processes, and which is linked back to your liver. And we might also have fatigue for low healthy microbes. Brain fog. This is a really big one. Brain fog is very common when we have either low microbes, bacterial overgrowth, and parasites. So when there's more toxins going into the bloodstream, and even more so if you have leaky gut. So leaky gut is when the gap junctions of the gut lining are not knitted tightly together, and they're a bit more loosely joining. And stress, and it's actually zonulin, the enzyme that increases the opening of the gut lining. And this means that there's going to be more things getting through into the bloodstream, more proteins, which leads to immune imbalance, and maybe food reactions and things like that, and more toxins. If there's an overgrowth of bacteria, parasites, that type of thing, there's going to be more endotoxins being released into the gut, and we might be absorbing some of those definitely into the bloodstream, and even more so if there's leaky gut. So that's going to be influencing the level of brain fog. Again, brain fog is a symptom that could be present for other reasons too, in relation to adrenal dysregulation. So that's why, it's really important as a practitioner, we take a lot of time with patients trying to understand their whole situation to work out where could the causative factors be for these symptoms. And is it likely gut related, or could it be linked to something else? And what testing do we need to do to prove or disprove our theories around that? So skin issues, we've spoken about that. Bacterial overgrowth, release of toxins. The skin is another organ of elimination. So it is going to, sorry, just bear with me. I'm just going to admit. And reacting to healthy foods. So, this is where we've got to think, well, why is our body not reacting well and, not breaking down these healthy foods? So this is very common in the FODMAP sort of situation. So why is our body not breaking down these different prebiotic fibers? These are signs to look for. And altered bowel motions. So that's another really common one. And we want to try to work out the causative factors for that. Okay, so food as medicine. Now, food really is or can be medicine for the gut. And I actually do a nutrition protocol called the GAPS Nutrition Protocol. So I'm a GAPS practitioner as well as a naturopath. And the GAPS nutrition protocols were developed by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. Sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful. And she has been helping people to heal their gut through the nutrition protocols, but it also has really great impacts on lots of other health conditions, like metabolic health conditions stemming from the nervous system, the central nervous system, things like autism, ADHD. All these types of things can be helped by the GAPS nutrition protocols, basically because we are healing the gut with them, but we're also providing the body with a lot of nutrition that supports other areas, like, say, for example, neurotransmitter production, because we're getting extra amino acids and things like that. So the GAPS diet is the traditional way of using the GAPS diet. It has a lot of animal protein in it, so obviously it's not going to be suitable for vegetarians or vegan ways of eating. But there are ways to modify for people that are vegetarian or vegan. So it does become a little harder because obviously we can't get the levels of protein in that we can with the traditional way of doing it. But, you know, I have people that they don't want to do the full GAPS protocols with the bone broths and things like that. So the modification for that is really just to make the vegetarian options low starchy carb. So we balance out the macros as much as possible. But the traditional way of doing it, honestly, amazing results. I've seen such good results with the GAPS nutrition protocols alongside of working with the microbiome mapping and obviously the natural ways and supplements that we will approach anything that comes up in the microbiome mapping. So it's really a whole unprocessed food approach, organic where possible. It's a lot of cooked foods. So thinking broths, soups, slow cooked foods, and we use fermented foods. And there's a couple of ways that you can utilize this approach. So there's the introduction diet with the GAPS diet, and then there's the full GAPS diet. So the full GAPS diet is basically, you could liken it to a paleo sort of approach, I suppose, but it's a grain-free and low starch. So not a lot of the root vegetables and no grains at all. But obviously, you know, you can eat everything else like lots of fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, these types of things. Buckwheat can be included because it is actually a seed. It's not a grain. And it is very low in starch. So you can do like buckwheat pasta, for example, if you're missing those types of things. And there's a lot of great options now that weren't around, you know, like years ago when I did this, learned this nutrition protocol, was trained in it. There weren't a lot of options. You have to make a lot of your own, like nut and seed breads and things like that in place of normal bread. But now there's a really great brand called Benerdi, and they do a really nice almond meal, linseed sort of bread, it's a great option if you toast it. It's not great untoasted, but if you're trying to limit your grain-based carbohydrates, that is a good option in place of normal bread. So what this does is it uses the components of the fats in the food and the components of the proteins in the food to help to heal the integrity of the gut. It helps to heal the gut lining. And it really helps to reduce inflammation in the body too. The introduction of fermented foods helps to get increased exposure to healthy microbes, which is what we want to do to help the body in building up the healthy microbiome. And then, you know, the veggies and fruits and things like that that you pop in, the fibers, they help to feed the microbiome as well. The introduction diet is a little harder to do. It is, it's more of a staggered approach. It goes through stages to get to the full GAPS diet. So you would start with just having meat stocks and broths and eggs, and then you'd build up to adding different things in like sour cream, fermented foods, you know, kefir, sauerkraut, avocado. So it sort of goes through these stages, and people that are using this to heal their gut, they might have certain symptoms that are present, say, in the first stage, and they only move on to the next stage when those symptoms start to clear up. Okay, so this is kind of like a rebuilding of the gut from the ground up. It is pretty intensive though, and not a lot of people choose to do the introduction diet, but they usually can get through and work with the full GAPS diet. So I do find that really helpful when we're trying to heal the gut. So using the right nutrition alongside of any other support that we're using is going to yield the best results in healing the gut. So what to avoid? What aggravates the gut? Well, not many surprises here. So gluten and dairy, most people know that if you have a compromised gut, this could be aggravating things. If you have leaky gut, this could be aggravating things. If you have inflammation in the gut, this could be aggravating things. So, you know, there's certain types of microbes like in our bifidobacterium that help us to break down lactose, for example. So if you have a depleted bifidobacterium profile, yes, you might find that you're not digesting lactose very well. And gluten, the type of protein, you know, if you have a leaky gut, then you can start to have reactions, inflammatory reactions to that if that protein is getting through into the bloodstream. Sugar or too many starches could aggravate a gut situation where we've got microbial overgrowths that are not helping us, okay? So this is where we get really uncomfortable and bloated and gassy and that type of thing. So these types of things are going to kind of work against the process of rebalancing the gut. Processed foods, we all know that, don't we? Processed foods are not going to be helpful. They're not real food. They're not going to add any benefit to our health. I know we can't avoid every single processed food, but really reducing your level of processed food intake is very beneficial, including, seed oils, canola oil, these types of oils. They're like in everything these days. They're in every packaged food. If you look at the back of it, even in bread, like if you look at even what I would consider, they have other healthy ingredients in the bread. If we're looking at, yes, not all breads are the same, canola oil is in there. It's just, it's really not beneficial to us at all. We can't break it down properly, and it causes more inflammation and oxidative stress to the cells of our body, which those fats are going to be transported around by cholesterol. So we want to avoid those at all costs. Cold and raw foods. So this one might not be as commonly known, what could aggravate the gut. But if your gut's a little compromised and you're lacking like digestive secretions, digestive enzymes, having cold raw foods could be a little bit aggravating to your gut, especially in the colder months. So most people might be able to get away with eating more salads and smoothies and things like that in the summer months. But in the winter months, it's really best to try and limit cold and raw food. If anything, those types of kind of carbohydrates, they take a little bit more digestive aid and power to break down. So especially if you're lacking in your healthy microbes, your lactobacilli helps to break down carbohydrates. So if you're lacking in lactobacilli, you might not be breaking down these things. Did I say carbohydrates? Sorry. In the raw foods like the salads and that type of thing. So these become a little bit more of an aggravating factor. And whatever doesn't get digested properly hangs around, and it feeds those microbes that we don't want to feed. So it causes a lot of bloating and pain and that type of thing. Okay, so the gut-skin connection. This is a really interesting one. So there's a couple of things to think about here. Leaky gut is a real problem with skin issues. And the reason why is it causes a lot of inflammation to your immune system. So a lot of our skin issues, if you're thinking things like rosacea, any sort of dermatitis, eczema, psoriasis, these types of things, there can be microbial elements to those things, but there's also inflammatory elements to these things. So when we have an atopic immune response, which is a more pro-inflammatory response going on in the immune system, it can be aggravated by what's going on or coming from the gut. So healing your gut can often help to clear up a lot of skin issues, especially if we discover that there's leaky gut, okay? And our lactobacilli has a huge role in helping to modulate and support gut inflammatory reactions, and so does bifidobacterium. So it definitely can be influential in balancing your immune system. So you've got to have good, healthy microbes for that too. So metabolites from those microbial overgrowths that we've talked about, so parasites, Candida, bacteria, these may trigger and worsen things like acne, eczema, and rosacea, or any sort of dermatitis, okay? So, particular like blastocystis I've seen really can aggravate skin issues. And we just look at this general toxic overload, all right? So coming from the gut, if there's a toxic overload, so that could be, poor dietary choices paired with bacterial overgrowths releasing toxins, paired with stress that's causing leaky gut. So this is it is a situation where, yes, if you're vulnerable to it, this could play out in your skin. Okay, so definitely looking at healing the gut, clearing the gut from any infections, eating the right foods to nourish and nurture our healthy microbiome. It's going to reduce the toxic load on the body, reduce the toxic load also on the liver, and it's also going to reduce the inflammatory impacts too coming from the gut. So that can really help with skin issues. And there's a particular strain called Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and that one helps to modulate histamine. And increased histamine increases things like interleukin-6. And interleukin-6 is linked to things like eczema and dermatitis. So it all kind of can stem from the gut. And that's why when we treat the gut and we rebalance things, we see an improvement in skin conditions. Okay, so the gut-mood connection, really important. So you may have heard that 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. So in particular, our bifidobacterium has a huge influence on the gut-brain axis and helps us in neurotransmitter formation. So really important to make sure that our healthy microbiome is flourishing, okay? So the microbiome, as I just said, affects mood. Certain microbes support neurotransmitter production. So these are your healthy microbes, okay? So we also want to make sure that there's no nasty microbes overgrowing, because we can see parasites may aggravate the gut-brain axis, and also things like Candida can also be linked to an increase in anxiety. So definitely good gut health can support a better clarity and less brain fog. Okay, so if we think about the importance of neurotransmitters, your gut and your microbiome it's so important to nurture that and nourish that and make sure that it's really, really good. And this is going to help us make those neurotransmitters and also clear up any brain fog. So we're going to have more clarity as well. Gut and immunity. So this is a really big one. And this is something that I've seen a lot more in clinic. So a lot more immune insufficiency, a lot more lower resistance, and increase in infections, and people not getting over these infections as easily as they used to. And if we think about all of the things that influence and attack our healthy microbiome, so that can be things like overuse of antibiotics, poor diet, increased stress, even things like the spike protein coming from COVID and the COVID vaccines. It actually has been proven that the spike protein, so before and after vaccination, it can completely wipe out your bifidobacterium, even if you had robust levels before. So I have seen a huge amount of low healthy microbes coming back in our microbiome mappings that we do. So, oftentimes your body might be compensating. So you've got okay levels of one, but very low of the other, or vice versa. So we're talking about bifidobacterium and we're talking about lactobacilli strains. But in a lot of patients, we're seeing very low microbes overall. So our modern way of living and the things that our body gets exposed to, it's not great for our microbiome. And over the generations, microbiomes are getting weaker and weaker. So microbiome transfer happens at birth, maternal transfer of the microbes, and then breastfeeding, and what happens in the first 3 years of life. And, it all depends on the strength of the mother's microbiome too. What is she actually passing on to the child? It plays a big role, like C-section births, that you're not getting that microbiome transfer. So we really need to be looking at, supporting the microbiome and putting good microbes in with probiotics and whatnot from a very young age, from birth, if it's a C-section birth. So yeah, we really need to work on supporting a robust microbiome if we want to see a good immune system. So as I've stated, that 70% of the immune system is in the gut, and your healthy microbes have a huge influence in things like promoting a healthy immune response. So promoting good T cell activity. So this is a regulatory part of your immune system. And it also is in a balanced cytokine production. So cytokines have either inflammatory actions or anti-inflammatory actions. And if we want a balanced cytokine production, we've got to have good balances of things like bifidobacterium strains. So that's really important for other things that are driven by, if we see increases in inflammation, we've got to look at the gut. What's going on with bifidobacterium? Enhancing immune cell development. So T cells, bifidobacterium is really important, can influence the development of T cells, and these are important for fighting infections, okay? I talked about the cytokines. I just want to make sure that I get all of this for you. And also secretory IgA. So secretory IgA is it is secreted into the gut, and it's like your gut immune response. And we do see a lot of low secretory IgA these days bifidobacterium influences the levels of secretory IgA. So we often work on boosting bifidobacterium and also boosting Lactobacillus rhamnosus to see improvement in secretory IgA levels, which helps to reduce food intolerances and to strengthen the gut immune response. So that's really important. With our lactobacilli, lactobacilli not only does it aid in digestion, but lactobacilli actually, in particular, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, which I mentioned before, is really important in balancing out histamine. So histamine can be responsible for intolerance and allergy reactions, but also common things like hay fever or sinus infections and things like that. Also, we're seeing a lot of increase in mast cell activation syndrome. So this is where there's just this accelerated release of histamine going on in the body and increased levels of interleukin-6, which is driving a lot of histamine responses. So we want to look at balancing the gut, supporting secretory IgA, supporting the integrity of the gut lining, so no leaky gut, getting rid of any gut infections, and boosting up all of the healthy microbes if we know exactly which strains in particular need to be boosted up. This is going to help people with recurrent illness, poor recovery, frequent upper respiratory conditions, and just overall improve the immune response, immune reaction. Okay, let's talk about steps to begin healing. So where do we start? Well, first we need to understand what is the irritant for the gut? What's aggravating this situation? So we need to target irritants, and that could be dietary irritants. It could be, internal microbial irritants. It could be stress as an irritant. We need to treat gut infections. So we need to establish what they are. So down the bottom, I've said functional testing. It really should go at the start, to be honest, because functional testing is going to make sure that we understand exactly where do the steps need to start. So are there functional aspects going on? Do we need to nourish the gut lining? Do we need to support the digestive process with digestive secretions? Or is there insufficient bile? We need to work out if there's infection of some sort, what overgrowths are present. We need to balance and restore the gut microbiome. And then we can kind of work out, once we know all of that information, well, what's the best way to eat to support all of this too? So, if you've got a parasite or a bacterial overgrowth or Candida, yeah, you really need to reduce the starches and the simple kind of carbs for a time being, just to support a rebalancing and starve off all of that microbial infection. As a naturopath, we use antimicrobials to help with that as well. We need to balance and restore the gut microbiome, but we can't do that as much if there's infections, because if you start putting a whole heap of prebiotic fiber into the gut to feed healthy microbes, it also feeds in the infections. So we've got to clear the infections first, and then we've got to work to build up the microbiome in the second part of what we do with treatment. So it will be suggested to take probiotics the whole time though, because that can really help, just to begin turning that internal environment around and strengthening all of the good stuff. And you need to address stress for sure. How can a naturopath help? Well, we focus on the root cause. So we focus on trying to understand all of the contributing factors to what's going on in the gut. And we look at individualized care. So I might have 10 patients at once that I'm helping with bloating, but I might not be doing the same things with each person, because their cause of bloating, it could be, any number of things that we've discussed. So it could be increased stress and anxiety. It could be low healthy microbiome. It could be a bacterial overgrowth, or it could be a parasite. So we can't just assume any of those. We've got to find out what they are first. And the step-by-step support. So understanding, what do I need to do now to address the particular things that are going on with my gut? What's the most important step to take first? And then how am I going to, work on the whole rebalancing? And we need to look at the whole person. So it's holistic in the approach. So yeah, a naturopath should be looking at the body holistically, taking into consideration that it's not just the gut we need to look at. Yes, maybe we need to look at the stress response. Maybe we need to look at helping a patient with creating a lifestyle that's not so stressful on the body, understanding how the mind affects the nervous system and then the gut. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration, and everyone is different. So that's why we need to be individualized in our care. So if you're wondering, okay, all of this is making sense. I definitely think I've got some gut issues that I need to be addressing. What do I do? Well, consider seeing a practitioner, of course, that knows what they're doing and knows how to help guide you through what needs to happen to work out what's going on with your gut, and maybe some of those other areas that could be connected to the gut, like your skin and immune system and your mood and nervous system, and work out a plan that is going to be understanding fully all the contributing factors. So think about a really big mind map. You might have, say, I don't know, bloating or constipation as your major problem. What are all the different things that could be contributing to that and making that situation worse? And, you know, we need to address those things one by one. Definitely consider testing. The geomicrobiome mapping test by Naturopath is the one that I use. And yes, it's an investment. It is expensive. So it's just over $400 at the moment to do this test, but it saves so much guesstimation work. And, you know, in most cases, unless there's other complex things going on, which is maybe 5% of the cases that I see, in most cases, we can get on top of the functional gut issues, and maybe, you know, the things that are linked to the gut, like immune system, skin issues, mood-based issues, if we do the testing and we can work out where the influences are, where are the causative factors. And then we can formulate how to use nutrition, how to use natural supplements, and what is the best sort of, you know, lifestyle sort of choices that are going to help to facilitate healing. And then lastly, you need to listen to your body. So our body has an innate intelligence that it's telling us, it's speaking to us all the time. And in our modern way and conventional way of looking at health, we often will choose not to listen to that. We will choose maybe an easier option that helps us in the short term, like symptomatic treatment. It might be using, it might be using like Nexium, for example, for reflux. It's helping with the symptoms, but it's not helping why they're there in the first place. It's just masking it, you know, and then you're going to get further issues. Then you might get constipation. So you might use, Movicol or some other kind of laxative stimulant to help you go. So your body is not doing its normal function, and you're just taking things to help that function to feel better, but it's not normalizing the function, because your body will become more reliant on these things. We need to listen to the messages that the body is giving us. If we're having bloating, we need to look at, well, why could this be? What is my body trying to tell me? What do I need to do to resolve and restore balance and harmony? Because if we do help to create the right environment for the body to balance and heal, it will do that. It will always do that. So we do need to start listening to our bodies and the messages that it's delivering. So thank you very much for coming along and joining me on this webinar, Gut Feeling. I really hope that you've learned something today. I hope that I've helped you in some way to understand more about gut health and all of the things that it can be linked to and what could be going on in a gut that is feeling out of balance. If you do want to stay connected, I'm on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. And yeah, I'm going to stop the recording now and we can have any questions.
Hey, Emma.
Hello.
Sorry. Sorry, I was so late. I had so much trouble getting through the Everbright.
Really? I'm sorry. I did you get my email? Because
I only saw it too late, but so sorry.
No,
but
that's
I can
fine.
see that it's recorded. So
yes, I will. I'll send you the link for it.
Fantastic.
If you want to watch it from the start.
Yes, great.
Yeah, I think you came in maybe a third of the way. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm right on time too. I think it went for, because I started probably about 5 or so minutes late anyway. So,
Yeah. No, fantastic.
yeah,
I'm glad you recorded it. And sorry
yeah.
about that.
No, absolutely fine, Michelle. I will send you the link and yeah, you can watch the
Thank
full
you.
thing. Yeah. Uh, beautiful. Thanks, Eleni. And yeah, I'll share the recording to everyone anyway. I'll share the link on. And if you've got any questions or anything, please let me know. Okay. All right. I'm going to be signing off now, guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you soon.